So yeah,
Yeah.
went to law school and was flight instructing while I was in law school, going to school at night. And then it was in my last year of law school. I took a class, and it was international comparative law. I had to write a paper on comparing two forms of law and kind of making an analysis on it. So
Yeah.
I compared the Japanese drone integration to the United States drone integration because we have a very similar kind of like legal structure, especially since World War II. And primarily did a whole paper on that because I was like, I'm gonna get a job trying to, turn this paper into almost like a mini book. And I ended up doing that. I published that as a book. And
Interesting.
I've been making money off that since law school, actually. And 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 so then what happened after that was I was at a University of Miami put on like a robotics law conference. I just
Yeah.
happened to go over and I ran into this lady and I started chatting with her, and she was the editor for this American Bar Association book on unmanned aircraft law. And I was like, really, you're doing that? I'm like, hey, and I pitched her. I'm like, well, why don't you have me write? Like, I'm a pilot, and here's my manuscript, the book I pretty much just did on the Japanese drone integration. I'm very familiar with the U.S. integration. And she was like, sure. So, I mean, this is why I'm in law school doing this. So basically wrote on the history of unmanned aircraft, and by God's grace, she told me to write on the FAA rulemaking process. Somehow now I'm literally involved in every rulemaking litigation case, it seemed like, with the drones after that. So I kind of was familiar with the situation from all of that. Later on, went and once I took the bar, passed first time. Then I was actually trying to be a prosecutor, and they literally gave me an interview. And everything was I was doing CLI, so I was going to the courthouse, doing prosecutions under the supervision of attorney. I was like, this is great. But then they had a hiring freeze right after they gave me the interview and everything
Oh
was
my
good.
gosh, that seems to be also a theme in your life.
I'm like, why can't you just like wait a week, man? Just can you give me 1 week and I'll be
Yeah.
right? So and then I mean I'm married and have a kid at that time, so I'm like, well, gotta put food on the table. So I ended up actually taking a job as a criminal defense attorney since I kind of knew that already.
Right.
Literally on the other side with the same people I was like working with, like how many weeks later. So it was really
Right.
enjoyable because like, oh yeah, I'm friends with the prosecutor. Like we used to work together. I'm friends with them, and I know the judges and everybody. And so, and then I did that. And then, so I worked in a criminal defense law firm. And then what ended up happening is my boss literally took me in one day on Friday and he's like, hey, I can't afford you anymore. I'm going to have to let you go. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh, this is on the criminal
okay.
defense side?
Yeah, on the criminal defense
Yeah.
side. Okay. And then that was, I was at October 2014. And, if you remember the section 333 exemptions, which are
Yep.
done according to a rulemaking process, which I
Yes.
was right, that came
Yep.
out, it was like the month prior. So then I talked to people and they were like, hey, start your firm. I'm like, okay. So I started it in January 2015. And then a little bit later on, the FAA decided to do that whole registration debacle where they're like, oh, let's just make the we're kush.
Yep.
Um, and then Taylor calls me because I took a large section from that chapter that I had written for the ABA and then put it
And that's the
online.
American Bar Association for those that don't know. Yeah.
Right.
Go
And
ahead.
then kind of where everybody started kind of realizing, that this was illegal. And then I guess that's kind of how people started knowing me. Then John Taylor actually gave me a call, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm suing, and you're interested." And it's funny because I'm like, "Well, when?" He's like, "Tomorrow." I'm like, "Okay," I'm like, so I literally get off the phone. I'm like, yeah, "I'm in." I could get my wife a call, and I was like, "Okay, we got to be up all night. We're typing this out." So we were like, he and I were up all night. We're like, "Yeah, let's do this,"
Yeah.
and I don't know. I passed out around like 3 a.m. and stuff, and then he filed the very next day. This was around, was it New Year's or Christmas or something? It was like they did it tactically. That phase tactical at trying to like
Well,
dump.
almost all the rules seem to come out like on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, something like this.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know how tactical it is, if it's just like that's when things
no,
get done, but usually no one's in the office. So, like, around those times. I worked in the federal government for 28 years, so like I always found that to be interesting. But for those that, just to catch people up, I want to say a couple things. Number one, we've got some folks out in the chat, Jonathan, that are cheering you on here. So Kevin Sanders is saying he's incredibly happy to tune in, see the ultimate industry influencer. I guess that's me. Conversing with the ultimate industry big legal brain, that would be you. And that he thinks you have Dick Clark's youth disease. So that's pretty funny. Dick Clark never aged. And then Chris Geneseth has a question, but I might defer the question, but he says, thank you. First of all, thank you for the work you do. He wants a perspective on FAA's 333 to 107 to what, the future holds and what we need to do as a community to combat bad policies and regulations. So I don't know if you want to answer that now or hold on that, but let's hold that for 1 second, just 1 second. And I want to catch everybody up because what Jonathan's alluding to here is the Taylor v. Huerta case. It was the registration rule case. And if y'all recall, Congress at some point, I think in one of those FAA reauthorization acts, had kind of warned the FAA, like, you don't have authority to govern model aircraft, right? It was around that the 333. It was around that section in whatever authorization that was. And then the FAA put out a registration rule requiring all hobbyists, recreation modelists to register their drones. And this is the case Jonathan's talking about, where he and John Taylor were up till 3 a.m. typing this, and ultimately were successful. So they prevailed in that case. The rule was ultimately struck down, and Congress had to go back after the fact and fix, kind of frankly, the mess in a way that they created. There's a lot of blame to go around here, but they put the initial guidance out in the law that the FAA should not be messing with the hobbyists, and then they changed their mind and did the small the recreational drone rules, what we call it now, all in response to what Jonathan is talking about.